Benn fought with everything he had, but when the final bell rang at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, reality hit like a sledgehammer. Chris Eubank Jr. didn't just edge him out, he broke him down. And now, in the chaotic aftermath, Benn's promoter Eddie Hearn is facing a brutal decision. Does he protect his fighter's future, or chase the ghost of family pride with a dangerous rematch? At the post-fight press conference, Hearn's voice carried a weight you could feel in your chest. He didn't sound like a promoter hyping the next big event. He sounded like a man staring down the hard truth. If Benn goes through another war like this, his career might never recover. That's not an exaggeration. It's the cold, brutal math of boxing, the kind that doesn't show up on scorecards but ends careers all the same. Tonight was supposed to be a triumphant chapter in Benn's story. The ring told a different tale. He started strong, snapping sharp jabs and moving with urgency, but as the rounds wore on, Eubank Jr.'s size, pressure, and relentless combinations slowly drowned. Those final 4 rounds, from 8 through 12, weren't just rough. They were a dismantle. Benn tried to fight back, but it was like trying to hold back the tide with bare hands. Eubank Jr. pressed forward, punching in bunches, leaving Benn no room to breathe, no room to... The judges were unanimous, 116-112 across the board. But truth be told, it felt even wider by the end. Now, Hearn is pushing an idea that might raise some eyebrow. If there's going to be a rematch, Eubank Jr. needs to come down even lower in weight. Benn had already moved up 2 full divisions just to meet him at 160 pounds, with a brutal 10-pound rehydration cap. And Hearn's thinking is clear. If they can force Eubank even closer to the danger zone, maybe, just maybe, Benn's speed and toughness could flip the script. But that's easier said than done. Anyone who's followed Chris Eubank Jr. knows he's not about to drain himself further just because Eddie Hearn asks nicely. The chances of convincing him to dip below 160 are slim to none, unless, maybe, Turki Al-Sheikh, the Saudi power broker behind so many of today's mega fights, decides to throw ridiculous money at. But even then, why would Eubank Jr. risk it? He's already proven he can handle. He doesn't need to hobble himself to do it again. And if Hearn really believes Conor needs those kinds of concessions just to stay competitive, there's an uncomfortable question staring him in the face. Is it even worth it? Maybe Benn should be thinking about moving back down to 147 to welterweight, where monsters like Jaron Boots Ennis, Brian Norman Jr., and Karen Chukadjian are waiting. It's a Shark Tank, no doubt, but at least it would be a fight on his terms, not one where he's giving away size, strength, and punching power every minute of every round. Of course, Hearn didn't exactly spell out how much lower he'd want Eubank to go. He kept it vague, maybe 157, 156, as low as they can possibly push it without completely wrecking Eubank Jr. physically. It's a dangerous game, and one that could backfire spectacularly if Eubank still manages to impose himself the way he did tonight, only now angry and starved. On top of it, for me, the danger wasn't for Chris Eubank Jr., it was for Benn, Hearn said, looking more like a concerned older brother than a slick promoter. He paused for a moment before adding, "That's why we have to think very carefully about the rematch. Because I don't want to see him in too many fights like that. They're the kind of fights that shorten your career, and Conor's got a long future ahead of him." There it was, raw, honest. Hearn admitted that while the terms for the rematch are technically already agreed to, mirror image of the first deal, he's hesitant. Deep down, he knows that nights like this are more than just brutal. They leave scars you can't see on MRIs. They take tiny pieces of fighters' souls, adding up one war at a time until there's nothing left but memories and regret. Still, the business of boxing rolls on. Asked about possibly scrapping the strict rehydration clause to make the second fight more fair, Hearn was firm. No dice. If anything, he thinks Eubank should suffer more, not less. "Yeah, I think Jr. should come down a little bit lower, rather than Benn coming up 2 weight classes," he said. But here's the part no one wants to say out loud. Even if Eubank cuts more weight, even if they stack the deck a little heavier in Benn's favor, there's a very real possibility that none of it will matter. Because at this level, Benn's ceiling might already be showing. There's no shame in it. Benn is a tough, rugged fighter with an iron will. But when you look at the world-class killers at 147 pounds, at 154, at 160, it's hard to see him beating guys like Boots Ennis, Sebastian Fundora, or Jermell Charlo. It's not just about heart, it's about tools. And tonight, when a faded 35-year-old Eubank Jr. possibly weight-drained himself could still dominate down the stretch, it exposed a hard truth. Benn isn't built to climb much higher. This fight being close wasn't a testament to Benn's greatness. It was a sign of where Eubank Jr. is at in his career. Chris is no longer the athlete he once was. His reflexes are a half step slower, his explosiveness muted, but even on a declining curve, he was too much for Benn when it mattered most. And now Hearn is staring into the abyss, trying to figure out if there's any way to spin it. Maybe there is. Maybe if you sell it as a rivalry so deep, so personal, that the names alone, Benn versus Eubank, are enough to pack a stadium. You don't need a world title on the line. You don't even need logic. You just need passion, pride, and a willing audience. And God knows boxing fans have never needed much convincing when blood and legacy are on the table. But here's the haunting part that hangs over it all. What if the cost is too high? What if chasing revenge, chasing redemption, chasing family pride leaves Conor Benn a shell of what he could have been? We've seen it before. Too many times. Young fighters pushed into back-to-back wars for pride and paychecks, only to flame out years before their time. There's a difference between being brave and being reckless, between fighting for glory and fighting blind. Eddie Hearn knows it. You could see it in the way he spoke tonight. Not with the bravado of a carnival barker hyping a rematch, but with the weary realism of a man who's seen too many bright futures dim too soon. So yeah, the rematch is technically on the table. Contracts are signed, venues are ready, but there's a heavy pause hanging between every word Hearn said. A hesitation that wasn't there before, because somewhere deep down, Eddie Hearn, Chris Eubank Jr., Conor Benn, hell, anyone who watched those last brutal rounds, they all know the truth. You can only go to war so many times before war.